Today on The State of Us, scams and hackers of kids, college students, and parents. How to keep yourself safe. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance Jackson. Today, we're looking at three different segments all around cybersecurity. We're looking at kids and what you as a parent might be sharing that you had no idea could drastically harm your kid in the future. We're going to talk about college students and some current scams that are going on that are actually taking hold. And you might think, well, aren't college kids supposed to be the tech literate ones? And then, of course, we have to talk about our boomers and the Gen Xers and all those parents out there, those aging parents, as the Wall Street Journal titles them. Questions that maybe you should ask them, or if you are one of them, ask yourself to see if you're really keeping your information safe.
I think it's really bad that people are attacking goats, their kids.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Lance doesn't like kids. He likes children.
Stoop so low.
And
Love
students,
children. Want to protect children. Children are our future. Children are good people that we need to make even better people. But, you know, to attack goats and kids it just totally frustrates me. With the children, it's the loving parents who possibly, according to this article, are possibly putting their children at risk. It's not that cyber criminals are preying on young children, but it's that information is being posted by parents about young children that could hurt them in the future. Is that my understanding? I mean, me not being the tech literate one, isn't that what I understood? Was that right? All the things that loving parents and I guess maybe even grandparents and aunts and uncles are posting about these new people walking around on our earth and showing all of their latest accomplishments and goals they've met and things they've achieved in the future could make it very simple for someone to steal their identity.
Well, the article points out that it all, of course, seems so innocuous and precious and starts even before birth. Parents post images of their scans with due dates included to social media sites. Both parents are usually tagged. The follow-up is a birth announcement, which normally includes the child's full name, date of birth, time of birth, weight, and hospital. Milestones are next: the child's first steps, first holiday, first pet, first word, best friend, favorite food, favorite color.
Wait a minute. I've filled out like credit card applications and stuff. Aren't those all questions that are asked, like if you want to quote, protect your information? Aren't those all security questions that people are just giving out that information?
Yeah. You know, because you're sitting there thinking, well, these have been security questions a long time. And like, if you're my age or Lance's age or anywhere in between there or older than, you know, Lance is, you're thinking, well, people didn't have access to that information for me. Well, right. Because even me as a millennial, I was born and my parents didn't have the option to post information about me to social media. It simply didn't exist.
Right.
The point there is that this is a new phenomenon since the dawn of social media, and particularly now that you have, for example, millennials, Gen Xers, who either grew up with social media in the case of millennials, or Gen Xers who have been young enough to really, you know, fully embrace it. And even boomers, as Lance pointed out, as grandparents, there's all these new options now, where before you may have picked up the phone and called, right, your family, maybe even sent, you know, a text out to family members, maybe wrote a letter, right, sent a card, whatever it might be. But that wasn't something that was widely accessible to the public or even to friends that were 2 or 3 links down the chain, right? I mean, it was generally going to be immediate family and people that immediately family spoke to. So, you know, how does this add up? Because the other thing is, it's okay, well, you've put this information out there, but, and that, I mean, that sounds, you know, obviously if people have access to your date of birth, that's an important common security measure that banks use, right? That you use for challenge questions, online accounts. So it's an important piece of personal information. That one, though, is generally more accessible, because even if it's not online, like if you register to vote and stuff, depending on the state, you can probably find that out. The reason that it's dangerous is it's the combination of the accessibility of this information, because it doesn't just stop with the raw data. By their 5th birthday, the average child today in the United States, Lance, their 5th birthday, they'll have around 1,500 photos of themselves shared online. This means that by the age of 13, when children are allowed to start using social media sites, in other words, the age at which social media sites say you may use them, right? They could already have nearly 4,000 photos depicting them online. Now, why does that matter? Well, they're just pictures, right? Well, remember those things called deepfakes that we've talked about before on The State of Us? Well, the way that artificial intelligence can maliciously create images of you that aren't you doing a thing, but that look exactly like you, is they learn from hundreds or thousands of photos of you or videos. And of course, with the rise of video, now you're talking about not just static images, right, but real movements. So now we can teach artificial intelligence to learn your facial expressions, how you talk, your voice. And the point is, while a lot of the technology, not everybody has access to technology that's that sophisticated yet, Yet. But the databases are being built, you know what I mean? So like if you started posting even just say 10 years ago, and you posted about your kid, that data is still out there. So it doesn't matter that the tech didn't exist when you started doing this. If the information is out there, once the tech catches up, now you can make use of it. Barclays Bank warned that by 2030, after another decade of parents gleefully and unknowingly sharing at current rates, which probably is a conservative estimate given that that'll probably increase, not decrease, 7.4 million identity theft cases could occur every year of children.
There's no parent out there who's doing what they're doing to have this happen to their children. But it's a risk. And nobody's saying that every child is going to have their identity stolen either, because there's more than, 7 million children. I mean, didn't we just pass 8 billion people in the world? Didn't I read that somewhere?
We got to be close, right?
So, it's not that it's going to happen to everybody, but you're not even thinking of that when you're posting their pictures and their information. And yet 7.4 million a year. I mean, that's a lot of identity theft.
It's a lot of identity theft, especially, you're talking about, it's bad when anybody's identity gets stolen. But the more information that's out there for longer, you're just simply by raw chance increasing the likelihood that that's going to happen.
Right.
Remember, it's not just identity theft either. It's also more effective scams as well. And that's part of what, we'll look at.
Because people know you, or
right,
because of all the information.
They have information about you.
That they can make themselves sound like it's somebody that you should trust to do whatever it is they're asking you to do, because they can tell you things about yourself that you think only mom and dad and grandma know.
Right.
Or maybe your brothers and sisters know. And now all of a sudden, with somebody with the data bank and the artificial intelligence now has that same information about you that only your closest family used to have.
Right.
So now it makes it easier to scam you because they can make it sound like somebody who is a close friend of yours. And they can even use that close friend's name.
Sure.
Because you've shared that close friend's name.
You've probably been in photos with them. So they know what your friend looks like, right? What their name is, so when they were born.
They could even attach a picture to the scam note saying it was your best friend asking for it. Am I...
No, that is very much what, because keep in mind, right, it's not just, this one kid has this information. It's also who are typically a child's best friend, somebody who's right around the same age, right?
Sure.
And they're probably going to be in photos with this kid, and they're probably going to have their name tagged on those photos. So now, right, and this goes back to, it could be a person, but you could teach a computer to do this. It digs into, hey, this person's been in, 50 photos with this. They must be friends. Let's learn about the friend. And then we can start sending information, and we know all this about the friend, and we know all this about the, person of the friend. I mean, it doesn't take very long to figure out how a person, a human being could pull this off, right? Let alone if you taught computers to do it at scale. They could be, and then, because again, who cares if 1,000 fail if one succeeds, especially if a computer's doing it, right? I mean, you just keep trying,
right? And
that's most phishing attempts, like via email and scam, they're not counting on everybody doing it. They only want to catch, a few. So it's kind of a shotgun, spray the bullets and see what hits kind of thing. But the point is that once you start down that thread, there's even the other side of, I think that's important to mention. We're talking about like the illegal side of, trying to intentionally rip people off or break the law by stealing people's info. But let's also keep in mind that there's the legal way that this jeopardizes you, which is you're giving all of this information to help Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube build profiles on you from the day you're born. They're already scary accurate at knowing what you like and what you want and how to keep your attention. How much better do they get if they have, instead of what you've given them, they have access to your entire life? They know you now from the moment that you're born. Even if you're not the one, and I thought this was an interesting point the article made, when posting information online, parents don't normally ask their children if they're comfortable with it. Yet, consider this. The UK conducted an internet survey on young people's experiences online and found that 46% of them felt anxious and out of control of their information when they discovered posts about themselves online that they hadn't been aware of. A further 44% felt angry, with only 15% seemingly indifferent. So what do you do about this? Well, the good thing is, right, the easy answer is don't do it. And that doesn't mean, don't ever post about your kid. I mean, if you want to be as safe as possible, that is probably the thing to do. You should text, private message, and you could text photos, to friends. You could, like if you use Snapchat, for example, don't add things to publicly accessible means. So like you could use Snapchat and send photos privately to your friends, but don't post it on the story, right? So when we're talking about tips, it really has to do with, you can still use social media to share good information. But the other thing they point out is check your privacy settings. If you're going to be sharing information about your children and you're not willing to just not do that, definitely make sure that people that aren't on your friend list can see this info. So that's kids. What about college students, Lance? You like them, right?
I do. They're good people.
Yeah. Well, but sometimes they're dumb. We can all be dumb. We can all be susceptible to these things. But that's part of why we want to talk about a few of the current common, say that fast, scams that college students are facing. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. Scammers like to prey on young adults because they are digital natives and often treat information received via text, email, or social media as trustworthy. Indeed, people age 20 to 29 reported losing money in 41% of the fraud cases that they self-reported to the Federal Trade Commission last year. By contrast, individuals aged 70 to 79 reported losing money in 18% of the cases that they reported, though their dollar losses tended to be greater than those reported by younger people.
There's on cable TV, I guess, when you don't stream and you have commercials.
That old fashioned,
the old fashioned way to do it. There's a commercial out there that talks about if somebody wants something involving cards, it's probably a scam. I mean, it's gotten to that point that it's so common that PSAs, public service announcements, are now talking about it. That if they want, so many movie cards or restaurant cards or whatever to solve a problem, it's probably a scam of some sort, which is amazing that it's grown to that point. We maybe all know somebody or have talked to somebody who had that happen to them or were a part of that. But to the point that now we're going to warn the general public with it is, to me, that's just amazing. I mean, it's like, wow. But like you said, right? You send it out to 100 million people. You don't need too many people to be the trustworthy soul. I was talking to you that, before we went on air, that the problem is most of us don't sit around thinking on ways to deceive people. Because
most of us aren't doing that.
We've been brought up that, well, you're going to be nice to people and we're going to treat each other with respect. And so therefore, that's when we become easy to scam, because our minds don't work that way. We don't see, oh, somebody needs help and they need this. Well, sure, I'm going to help them out. That's what I was taught to do, right? When I was brought up, we've talked many times on this show how, both of our parents said, we're going to be, we're going to respect old people and we're going to, the elderly, and we're going to help them and we're going to shovel their snow off their walks for free, or we're going to mow their yard, or we're going to do this, that, or the other. And so we're not brought up to even think deviously. So it makes us, and it's sad to say, but then it makes us even easier people to take advantage of, right? I mean, that was my point to you, is that we soft-hearted people who don't think that way. Because I know people get upset with me. I'm like, well, did you ever think that maybe somebody's trying to do this? And they're like, oh, well, why would you say that? That's bad. And I'm like, well, because there's bad people in the world. And we don't want to stop and think that there are bad people. But there are bad people who are thinking of what they're spending their time trying to figure out how to take your stuff without having to work for it.
Right. It's not like it doesn't happen. I mean, in 2021, consumers aged 20 to 29 lost $363 million from fraud that was reported. Now, I want to add that important caveat there. These are people that reported the fraud. Never mind that many people don't ever report the fraud in the first place. Some of the common ones right now, Lance, that college students are facing: federal student loan forgiveness scams with Biden's, big program to basically forgive large amounts of student debt. While that's on hold, the very important thing that somebody from the Federal Trade Commission says, you just need to remember this, because this isn't just this loan forgiveness. Anything dealing with federal student loans, it is illegal to collect money upfront in advance in providing debt relief services. The other thing is tuition and scholarship scams, which are very similar to the federal student loan forgiveness scams. Again, we talked about all that posting that parents do, and then obviously your college student that you do. It's probably no challenge at all to figure out what university you go to, right? In fact, it may be one of the pieces of information in your profile is I'm attending class of whatever, right? So what happens is
I'm going to major in this blank area.
Right.
So then all of a sudden now as a scammer, I'm like, hey, here's a scholarship for people who want to study, Asian studies at Rutgers University.
Right.
And you're like, oh man, that's me. That fits. I've heard, right? My counselors at school told me there's all kinds of weird scholarships out there, and I've been cruising the internet trying to find them. Well, here's one that fits my major at the school I'm going to.
Yep.
I'm going to fill this out. I mean,
well, and you could even call and pretend.
Kind of stuff, right?
I mean, somebody could call and pretend to be with the university, right? I mean, they know where you go. They know what your class is. They know your name, right? And if you've been being posted online about since you were born, they may even know your birth date, so they can give you a lot of stuff right up front that sounds highly legitimate. We're calling you because, you were on our list of students and we're from the, bursar's office or whatever. And, we know that you've got, a lot that you have to pay coming up. So you've qualified for this scholarship. Can I send you the link to apply? Well, sure. Yeah. Send me that link. So you say, well, what do you do about this? Because how?
Because that sounds perfectly legitimate, right? I mean, they know everything about you, and
they're calling from the school, from a school office. Yeah. They're probably using a local phone number that was purchased online, right? I mean, so it all seems pretty legit, and they could even give you a link to a site, because keep in mind, right? I mean, websites for universities are public, so you get a link that's very similar to a university website, and they could copy the branding of the university website and make their page look similar enough that it's like, yeah, I mean, this, why wouldn't this be the real
because
deal?
you're all excited. Hey,
Right.
I got a chance to,
Yeah.
here's $1,000 off my bill or whatever.
Right. So you do all that, and then woof, they take your information. So how do you avoid that? Well, what the article recommends is anytime that somebody reaches out to you about tuition or scholarships, and you've not already been in communication with somebody about it. In other words, it's not a follow-up. You know what I mean? It's a, hey, we want to let you know about XYZ. You can thank them for their time. You can hang up and you can call the number of the office or email the office directly and say, hey, I got this inquiry. I just wanted to find out, more information about this or check to make sure that, it was an opportunity that and then you'll find out right away because you are calling them. I actually went through recently, Lance, one of my credit card numbers was stolen. I don't know how or where, but it got stolen because there were charges showing up and my bank proactively locked my account. But I became very wary then I was very concerned when the bank would call me, and then they can't talk to you until they verify who you are. So I actually hung up a couple times and called the bank at the number on the back of the card.
Because they were asking you information to make sure that you were the right person to talk to.
Right. And I just wasn't, I was like, with everything going on, for all I know, you guys are the scammers. You know what I mean? You're calling me and I'm going to verify this stuff. And then now you're going to have access to everything that I'm doing with the bank to try to fight this and just deeper dive in the rabbit hole of being stolen, So thankfully that got worked out. But that's always the thing. If you're suspicious of somebody having called you and you're not sure whether or not to give the information out to them, you can always hang up and call the official number that is the correct one and do it that way. And that's really not just this. That's
the way to protect yourself.
And that's not just college students, but online income scams are the other big one. Job scams rank number 4 among the top scams reported this year by people in their 20s. In October, FBI New Haven published a warning to college students and professors about a scam in which swindlers post online job advertisements soliciting college students for administrative positions. Instead, the students are duped into becoming money mules, receiving counterfeit checks in the mail or via email, depositing them into their personal accounts, and then wiring the funds to someone else under the pretense that it's going to a vendor for job-related equipment, materials, or software. If a company, quote-unquote company, hires you and wants you to deposit money in your account and then pay it out to somebody else, you should probably find a different, again, air quote here, company to work for.
Well, the article, I think, states that you are the one the government's coming after.
Well, yeah, because you're the one committing the money laundering.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know. Well, again, how are you going to prove that? Because what it looks like is a check came in, you cashed it, and then you sent it out to somebody else.
Scary stuff. I mean, it just is really, again, as we started this segment, I said most of us are honest people and don't think about somebody trying to take advantage of us, which then makes it easier for them to take advantage of us. So like you said, the only thing to do is to be a little bit leery and say, well, that sounds really good. Let me call you back. And, and then my old adage is if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Now, might you miss out on a few things that way? I guess, but then you don't get taken advantage of either.
Right. It's there's definitely a trade-off. So let's talk about the last group, our favorite, questions to ask seniors about their phones. And really, this is questions to ask yourself as well, because depending on who you are and when you're listening, they're good self-critical questions for all of us, but particularly older adults tend to be vulnerable to some of these items with their smartphones. Or if you're like Lance, your dumb phones. But, all of those. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. %, Lance, of adults age 65 and older say that they own a smartphone. So the majority, 6 in 10.
I'm not even sure that I'm going to just stop right here.
Okay.
I'm not sure I like the term smartphone.
Yeah.
Because if it's a phone, phones are supposed to call people. My phone calls people.
Yeah.
So it's not dumb. If you want a handheld computer that will let you talk to people,
You want to do some redefining.
I think we want to redefine what these things are, because they are way more than a phone. I mean, they're doing, I have a phone. My phone's not dumb. My phone calls people just fine.
The phone feature works.
Works very well. Yes.
45% of adults age 65 and older say that they use social media, and 75% of adults age 65 and older report using the internet. So old people are online.
Well, sure.
I mean,
they're out there. They're always make fun of us. You always make fun. Oh, you guys don't know it. We know it all. We just decide that we don't want some of it. We don't want to participate.
We know all of it.
But we're not scared of it. It's not that we don't want to do it. It's like, I've gotten by this long without it. I don't need it. Yeah, sometimes it makes life easier, so we do that part of it. But for the most, it's not any easier. I mean, it is. How many times have I had people pull it out and spend 15 minutes looking something up, and I can find it in 2?
Now, last I checked, I mean, Lance is over the age of 60.
I am.
Adults 60 and over lose the most money to fraud each year, and phone scams do the most financial damage, according to the Federal Trade Commission
I can see that.
report released in October of 2020. So it's vital that you be cautious about your information.
Yes,
right?
Because it is a new technology to us, right? I mean, you have been using a phone and technology as long as I have, if not longer.
Right, pretty much, yeah.
And so therefore you are more comfortable with it, understand it better, because it was given to you at a younger age. And so it just makes sense then that those of us who were given the technology later in life, it's not that we don't want to accept it. We don't learn it as quickly because it's new to us, and we have to break down the barriers that we have from previous learning. When it's given to you as you're learning something, it's much easier to, right? Like a foreign language. If we really wanted young people to know foreign languages, we would start when they're in preschool, and then they would have no problem with it. Well, what do? We wait until they get so much information in their head. Now it's a struggle to learn a new language. That's what technology is to older people. It's not that we can't. It's not that we don't want to. We just have to break down all this other learning that we have to learn how to use this, which then opens us up to, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I talk to you all the time about watching young people use their phone for things like that I had never even thought of to use your phone for. Like, well, there's a list of something. So I grab my pen and a piece of paper and I start copying the list. And I see millennials and younger just take their phone out and take a picture of the list, and now they've got that list with them. Well, doesn't that make sense? But I never would have thought to do that, because when I wanted a list of something, I had to write it down. So, it makes sense then that we would have opened ourselves up to scams using this technology. That it makes sense to me. And it's too bad, because who are people preying on? The elderly.
Yep.
Like you said at the beginning of the show, the 2 groups that I think you need to take care of are the young people and the elderly.
The young and the old, everybody else for themselves.
You fend for yourself.
Is your phone password protected? That's the first question up. And you might say, well, why does that matter? Because it could be tempting, right? I don't have to punch in a code every time or whatever. I just want to get into my phone. But
what if you lose your phone or misplace your phone, right?
Right. What if somebody gets a hold of it? And
if you don't have it on there, you just make it even easier, right? Is this like a level of defense?
Yes. It's the first, really, it's the first line. It's a physical barrier to when your phone, right? Most modern phones, when the PIN has not been put in, you cannot. And this was a big thing with Apple that we talked about, remember, a few years ago, where
that.
Law enforcement wanted Apple to break the PIN code on the iPhone so that they could get into it. And Apple claims and still maintains we can't.
Right.
It's
personal. We don't have access.
Right. We do not have access to it. It's tied specifically to that phone. And the only way to get access to the information is to enter the PIN code correctly. That's it. That's the only way you can get in there. Theoretically, write a 4-digit PIN, like with enough time, process of elimination, you could get it open. But keep in mind, right, most phones, after a few unsuccessful attempts, will lock themselves for a duration of time, and that progressively gets longer every time that you've entered something incorrectly. So it can become, months before you can try again.
So this is the thing that, okay, it takes you milliseconds to type in the PIN, but it's probably the easiest and safest way to protect the information on your phone.
Right. Well, and I almost never, like on my phone, Lance, I almost never actually put in my PIN. Why? Because there's a fingerprint reader that's
you have the
under
fingerprint
the scan.
reader or
and so when I pick up my phone and touch it, me touching it unlocks it because it checks the fingerprint. But the point is, so it doesn't have to be, I have to use the numeric PIN. You have to set up a numeric PIN to set up the other features. But you can set up things that let you in real quick. Like if you have an iPhone Face ID.
I was going to say, don't some handheld computers, see, I'm not going to call it a phone, handheld computers recognize your face?
Yes. So the point is, if you have a smartphone, it has a way to set up one of those features. You ought to have that feature set up.
So if you're worried, if you're a younger person like you who has, like you do, you have older people in your life.
Yes.
Maybe you should just check with them.
Yep.
And if they don't have it, help them set it up and explain to them why they need it. Because I think, us older folks, if you tell us why it's important, we're like, oh yeah, especially if you're someone we trust, we're like, oh, that makes sense. Okay. I didn't even realize that. So step one for me is if you've got some 60 plus people in your life, go check on them. Just ask them very simply, do you have this in there? Have you done this?
Well, and you might say, I don't care if somebody gets my information, but remember, let's go back to that kid example at the very beginning. Even if you're not really worried about your own digital safety, the way, if you're going to talk to your parents or grandparents about this and help them set it up, and they want to know why it's important, say, well, don't you have Facebook on the phone? Well, yeah, what's that got to do with it? Well, if somebody gets your phone, they're into your Facebook account, right? Yeah. Well, then couldn't they message friends and family from the real account that's supposed to be you asking for things? Oh, that it's a very small, simple example of one leads to two quickly. If somebody gets your phone and it's not locked, you have all kinds of stuff on there, right? That it's not all just about you then. It's about who else can they get access to.
Or mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, you could be harming me.
Right.
By not having
you could accidentally
this code in place.
You could accidentally get your family scammed out of stuff because what's more legitimate than, you get a call or a text from, if one of your daughters got a text from your phone, Lance, and it came through and it's from you. Why would, you're not going to immediately assume, right? Like we talked about, well, this isn't him, it's from his number. It's in my contacts. Like what?
Yep.
You don't even think twice about whether or not it's actually the person on the other end.
So if you love us, check on us.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. if you younger folks love us older people, check on us.
Yes.
Or if you don't, but you want to protect yourself, check on us.
Do you update your phone's software? This is another big one. A lot of people do not. You should, and you might say, I don't want to keep up with all the new features. Understandable. However, by not doing that, you're not getting your security updates either. And those updates are probably the main reason to do it, not for the features, but for the ongoing updates, often.
So the software updates have
security
things in them.
Because these big companies, right, like Google and Apple, they have whole teams of people who are constantly uncovering holes in their security measures because people report them and say, hey, somebody, whatever. And, we found this vulnerability, so now we're going to plug it, right? Well, if you don't download the updates, you don't get that. So you still have all these holes, and the older it gets, the easier it is to break into because it's out of date. It's not using the latest security. The holes and vulnerabilities are all available to, the people. And the longer that those vulnerabilities exist and the more out of date you become, the sooner and the easier it is for them to get access. The other one I want to mention, because they have a lot, is do you get alerts from your bank? So this is one, even if you don't necessarily want to do online banking, you should call your bank and see if they offer this. You can set up text message alerts from your bank anytime a transaction of X amount or greater is done, or anytime a transaction is done outside of the state, or banks do it differently. The point is, if you don't have those set up, you probably should, because one of the fastest ways to stop credit card or debit card fraud, even if you're doing everything right, but somebody got your number somehow nefariously, like a third party didn't keep the info safe when they, ran it or whatever, is by getting those alerts. Because you get an instant alert the minute that something happened. You can say, I'm in Ohio, not in California, and I definitely didn't just spend $300 at birthday supplies and more. And so what do? Then you can call the bank right away and say, hey, I don't know who this is, but it ain't me. Yeah. Bam, we stop
without
it.
that alert, it could be 30 days till your next bank statement comes.
And you have
that's the first. And so then for 30 days, somebody's using your stuff,
racking up these charges. So the other thing is, not everybody likes this, but if you have a credit card and you're willing to pay it off every month, one good reason to use a credit card instead of a debit card is often the liability protection is greater, because keep in mind, until that statement comes through, it's the bank's money that's been stolen, not yours. So I know that seems like a small technicality, but it isn't. These banks, they're not real fond of people taking their money. So they're usually pretty quick on the draw. And not that they won't be with debit cards, but usually debit card loss protection isn't as great. And the other thing is you have to wait for that money to come back to you. I mean, once the bank knows, right? It's not like, oh, well, the money's back. It has to go back to your account. With a credit card, they remove it and it doesn't even show up on your next statement. So just another thing to throw out there. Again, different banks do it differently, but debit cards generally aren't always as secure from a fraud standpoint as a credit card is.
So check what you have and
think about
what's best. Right.
Yep. So Lance,
good advice.
Why do we have this show? I mean, there was a lot of stuff we didn't get to, but hopefully we got to a few things that.
Well, and as always, the articles are linked to the show, so you can get in there and read it and for yourself. And if you're like me and didn't understand everything, then you ask for help. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't be ashamed to not understand something and ask for help. That's, as a lifelong teacher, you're not supposed to know everything, but you need to know somebody who can help you fix it, somebody you trust. And the reason we had this one is because True Chat has a mission. It is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And hopefully you learned something today. I know I did. And you can share it with your family and friends. And if they say, well, this sounds like a show that I might want to tune into every once in a while, and they talk about some really, really good stuff, tell them they can find us as a podcast on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays, released first thing in the morning as a podcast. We're also heard on AM and FM radio stations across the United States on the weekends. For The State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.